What's the biggest lie you told that spiraled out of control? I was 23, working as a barista, when I met Delilah at a coffee shop in Portland. She was stunning. Auburn hair, green eyes, and this laugh that made my chest tight. She ordered a complicated drink while talking on her phone about some medical research conference. When she hung up, I said, "Sounds like fascinating work." She smiled. "Are you in medicine?" Here's where I should have said no. Should have mentioned my philosophy degree collecting dust while I made lattes. Instead, my mouth opened and out came, "Yeah, I'm a surgeon. Just finished my residency." The lie felt so small at first. What were the odds I'd see her again? She lit up. "Really? What's your specialty?" "Cardiac," I said, because it sounded impressive. We talked for an hour. She was a medical equipment sales rep, traveling between hospitals. Smart, funny, passionate about her work. When she asked for my number, I floated for days. Our first date was incredible. Delilah told me about her childhood, her dreams of becoming a doctor before switching to sales. I made up stories about my residency, using medical terms I'd Googled frantically the night before. 3 months in, we were serious. She'd introduced me to her friends as Bryce, the heart surgeon. I'd created this whole fictional life, fake colleagues, made up hospital stories, even a pretend student loan debt. The problem was, Delilah lived in this world. Her friends were nurses, doctors, pharmaceutical reps. At dinner parties, they'd ask about specific procedures. I became an expert at deflecting. Patient confidentiality, I'd say with a knowing smile. Different techniques at different hospitals when asked about methodology. I studied medical journals obsessively, memorized surgical terms, watched YouTube videos of actual heart operations. The lies layered on top of each other until I was living a completely false identity. My apartment became a medical library. I had textbooks stacked everywhere, anatomy charts on the walls, and a whiteboard covered with cardiac terminology. My search history was entirely medical procedures, surgical techniques, and hospital protocols. I subscribed to medical journals, joined online forums for physicians, and even started wearing scrubs around the apartment to stay in character. The first major close call came at a dinner party thrown by Delilah's friend Monica, who worked as an OR nurse. She cornered me by the kitchen, wine glass in hand. "So, Bryce," she said, "what do you think about the new robotic surgery systems? We just got one at Sacred Heart." I'd never heard of robotic surgery systems, but I nodded sagely. "Revolutionary technology. Really changes the precision possibilities." "Absolutely," she agreed. Though I heard Dr. Patterson had some complications with the Da Vinci last week. Apparently the instruments malfunctioned during a mitral valve repair. I had no idea what a Da Vinci was or what a mitral valve repair involved, but I kept my expression neutral. Equipment failures are always concerning. What was the outcome? Oh, they switched to traditional open heart mid-procedure. Patient did fine, but it added 3 hours to the surgery. "That's what good training prepares you for," I said, hoping I sounded wise rather than clueless. Monica studied my face. "You seem really young to have completed your residency. Where did you train again?" My palms started sweating. "Johns Hopkins." "Really? My cousin just finished her surgery rotation there, Rebecca Chen. You might know her." I smiled and shook my head. "Different years, probably. Big program." But that night, I spent 4 hours researching Johns Hopkins' cardiac surgery residency program, memorizing faculty names, program requirements, and even the layout of their facilities. I created an entire fictional timeline of my education, complete with professors I'd supposedly studied under and fellow residents I'd supposedly trained with. The second close call was worse. Delilah and I were at a medical equipment trade show. She was working, and I was tagging along as her boyfriend. We were walking past a booth demonstrating new surgical instruments when the representative spotted us. "Are you two in cardiac surgery?" he asked, noting Delilah's badge. "She's in sales," I said. "I'm a surgeon." His eyes lit up. "Perfect. Would you mind taking a look at our new minimally invasive bypass instruments? We'd love feedback from someone actively practicing." He led us to a demonstration area where he'd set up a practice station with synthetic heart models. Other surgeons were gathered around, testing the instruments and discussing their applications. "Dr. the rep prompted. "Morrison," I said. "Bryce Morrison. Dr. Morrison, would you like to try the new articulating forceps? We've redesigned the grip angle for better visualization during posterior vessel anastomosis." I stared at the instruments, having no idea what I was supposed to do with them. The other surgeons were watching, and Delilah beamed with pride beside me. "Interesting design," I said, picking up the forceps and examining them like I knew what I was looking at. "The articulation allows for 15 degrees more rotation than our previous model," the rep continued. "We think it'll significantly improve access in tight spaces." I nodded and moved the instruments around, trying to look like I was evaluating their functionality. One of the other surgeons stepped closer. "Dr. Morrison, right? Have we met? You look familiar." My heart rate spiked. "I don't think so. Where do you practice?" "Oregon Health Sciences. I'm Tom Nguyen, chief resident in cardiac surgery." "Nice to meet you," I said, shaking his hand and praying he wouldn't ask any technical questions. "What's your take on these instruments?" he asked. "We're considering them for our program." I examined the forceps again, buying time. "The articulation is definitely impressive. I'd want to see how they perform in actual tissue before making a recommendation." "Absolutely," he agreed, "though the grip ergonomics feel solid. What's your experience with minimally invasive approaches?" This was exactly the kind of question I'd been dreading. "Mixed results," I said vaguely. "Really depends on the patient anatomy." "True," he nodded. "We've had good outcomes with the right candidates. Where are you practicing now?" I'm between positions right now, I said, taking some time to consider my options. Smart move. Market's competitive right now. Well, nice meeting you. As we walked away, Delilah squeezed my arm. You handled that perfectly. I could tell he was impressed. That night, I researched minimally invasive cardiac surgery techniques until 4 a.m., terrified that I'd run into Dr. Nguyen again and be expected to hold a more detailed conversation. By month 6, Delilah was in love with someone who didn't exist. That's when her mother had the heart attack. The call came at 2 a.m. Delilah was sobbing, barely coherent. She's at Portland General. The doctors aren't telling us anything. Can you come? Can you help? My stomach dropped. Of course, I heard myself say. At the hospital, Delilah grabbed my arm. The surgeon is Dr. Rodriguez. He's young, just finished his residency. I don't trust him. Can you observe the surgery? Make sure he knows what he's doing? I stared at her through the fluorescent hospital lighting, my mouth dry. Around us, nurses rushed past pushing equipment. Monitors beeped from nearby rooms, and I could smell that antiseptic hospital smell that I'd only experienced as a visitor. Bryce, she said, her voice breaking. Please, I can't lose her. You're the only person I trust right now. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Trust. She trusted me with her mother's life, and I was just a barista who'd watched some YouTube videos. That's when I realized how deep I was. This wasn't about impressing a girl anymore. Her mother's life was hanging in the balance, and she was counting on me, a barista with a philosophy degree, to somehow save the day. Let me talk to Dr. Rodriguez, I said, buying time. I found him scrubbing in, looking exactly as young and nervous as Delilah had described. When I introduced myself as Dr. Bryce Morrison, his face brightened. Dr. Morrison, I've heard about your work. This is incredible. Having someone of your reputation here for this case. My blood ran cold. Somehow my fake identity had preceded me. What exactly have you heard? I asked carefully. Your innovative approach to bypass procedures. Dr. Chen at Providence mentioned your technique saves an average of 40 minutes operating time. I nodded, having no idea who Dr. Chen was or what technique he was referencing. The lies had spread beyond my control, creating a reputation I'd never built. Dr. Rodriguez launched into the surgical plan. Mrs. Brennan, Delilah's mother, had suffered a massive heart attack. 3 arteries were blocked. Without immediate surgery, she had maybe 6 hours. The LAD has a complete occlusion, he explained, showing me the angiogram. We'll need to do a triple bypass, Lima to LAD, vein grafts to the right coronary and circumflex. I stared at the images, trying to process what he was telling me. From my obsessive research, I knew LAD meant left anterior descending artery, and Lima was left internal mammary artery. But seeing actual cardiac catheterization images of a real person's blocked arteries, Delilah's mother's blocked arteries, was completely different from studying textbook diagrams. I'd be honored if you'd assist, he said. Or better yet, lead the procedure. The room spun. I think you should take the lead, I managed. I'll observe and offer guidance. That's very generous, he said. Having a senior surgeon observe always makes me feel more confident. For the next hour, I stood in that operating room, wearing scrubs I had no right to wear, watching Dr. Rodriguez work while Delilah's mother's life hung in the balance. The surgery was more intense than anything I'd seen in my YouTube research. The precision required, the split-second decisions, the careful manipulation of vessels that were literally keeping someone alive, it was both beautiful and terrifying. Every few minutes he'd look to me for confirmation, a nod, a suggestion, any sign that I approved of his technique. Looking good, I'd say, praying I wasn't inadvertently signing her death warrant. Excellent visualization, I offered when he positioned the retractors. When he encountered some scar tissue that made the bypass more challenging, he glanced at me with concern. This adhesion is more extensive than expected. What's your preference for approach? I had no idea what the options were, but I remembered reading something about surgical experience being about adapting to unexpected findings. What are you thinking? I asked, turning the question back to him. I could take a more lateral approach, but it might require extending the incision. Patient safety is the priority, I said, which seemed like something a responsible surgeon would say. He nodded and proceeded with the extended approach. The surgery was successful. Mrs. Brennan stabilized, and Dr. Rodriguez credited my presence and expertise for his confidence during the procedure. Having you here made all the difference, he said as we left the OR. I've been struggling with confidence lately, but knowing you approved of my technique really helped. Delilah hugged me in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. I knew having you there would make the difference. I held her, feeling like the lowest form of human life, but instead of confessing, I doubled down. The next morning, I called in sick to the coffee shop and spent 14 hours researching everything I could about the surgery Mrs. Brennan had undergone. I studied Dr. Rodriguez's technique, memorized the equipment used, even researched the specific complications that could arise during recovery. When Delilah asked about the procedure, I was ready. I explained the surgical approach, the risks involved, and the recovery timeline with an authority that shocked even me. You saved her life, she said. Dr. Rodriguez told me he'd never felt so confident in surgery. He said having you there was like having a masterclass in cardiac surgery. The praise felt like poison. Over the next few weeks, as Mrs. Brennan recovered, I became Portland's most reluctant fake surgeon. Dr. Rodriguez started consulting me on other cases, calling me at random hours to discuss surgical approaches. I've got a 67-year-old male, severe 3-vessel disease, he'd say. EF is down to 25%. What's your thinking on surgical candidacy? I'd excuse myself, frantically Google the terms he mentioned, then call back with vague advice I'd cobbled together from medical websites. Sounds like he'd benefit from revascularization, I'd say, having learned that was a general term for improving blood flow to the heart. That's what I was thinking. On-pump or off-pump approach? What's your comfort level with each? I'd deflect. I prefer on-pump for complex cases. Sounds reasonable, I'd agree, having no idea what the difference was. You have such an intuitive understanding of cardiac care, he'd say. Where did you train again? Johns Hopkins, I'd reply, having memorized their cardiac surgery program details. The web of lies grew more complex daily. I created fake colleagues, invented conferences I'd supposedly attended, and even printed business cards with a fake practice address, a medical building where I'd rented a small office space and had mail forwarded. Delilah's friends started referring their family members to me for consultations. I'd meet them at coffee shops, wearing a suit I'd bought specifically for these occasions, and offer general wellness advice disguised as medical insight. Prevention is the best medicine, became my catchphrase. Every case is unique, was my favorite deflection. Mrs. Patterson, a 58-year-old teacher, came to me worried about chest pains. I listened to her symptoms, shortness of breath during exercise, occasional chest tightness, and recognized them from my research as potential cardiac warning signs. I think you should see a cardiologist for a full workup, I told her. It's probably nothing serious, but chest pain always warrants investigation. She followed my advice and was diagnosed with early-stage coronary artery disease. With medication and lifestyle changes, she avoided the heart attack that might have killed her. Dr. Morrison saved my life, she told everyone. He insisted I get checked out when other doctors might have dismissed my symptoms. I charged nothing for these consultations, claiming I was between practices, which only enhanced my reputation as a caring, principled doctor. But the pressure was mounting. Other physicians started reaching out, wanting to collaborate or refer patients. I received invitations to speak at medical conferences, requests to review medical journal articles, and inquiries about joining hospital staff. The breaking point came 4 months later. Delilah and I were at a medical conference. She'd insisted I attend as her guest. I'd spent weeks preparing, memorizing attendee lists and recent cardiac surgery innovations. The conference was massive, with hundreds of doctors, researchers, and medical device representatives. During the cocktail hour, Dr. Amanda Voss, chief of cardiac surgery at Oregon Health and Science University, approached us. Dr. Morrison, she said, extending her hand. I've been hearing fascinating things about your work. My palms went sweaty. Dr. Voss was a legend in cardiac surgery, someone whose papers I'd been reading obsessively for months. She'd pioneered several techniques that were now standard practice, and her textbook was considered the definitive guide to cardiac surgery. I'm particularly interested in your bypass technique, she continued. Dr. Rodriguez has been raving about it. I'd love to discuss the specifics. I launched into the most technical explanation I could manage, stringing together medical terms I'd memorized without fully understanding. My approach focuses on optimizing graft patency through enhanced anastomotic technique, I said, hoping the terminology would impress her. Dr. Voss listened intently, her expression growing more puzzled with each sentence. Interesting approach, she said slowly. Though I'm confused about your suture methodology. Could you clarify your technique for the anastomosis? I had no idea what anastomosis meant beyond its basic definition as a surgical connection. It's quite technical, I said, hoping she'd drop it. Of course, she smiled. But surely you can give me the basics. I'm always eager to learn new techniques. Well, I began, desperately searching my memory for anything relevant. The key is maintaining optimal tension while ensuring adequate blood flow. Naturally, she agreed. But which suture technique do you prefer? Running or interrupted? And what's your approach to the heel-to-toe anastomotic sequence? I was drowning. It depends on the specific anatomy, I said weakly. Certainly. But in a standard LAD anastomosis with Lima conduit, what's your preferred technique? The conversation continued for 20 excruciating minutes. Dr. Voss asked increasingly specific questions, while I provided increasingly vague answers. By the end, her friendly interest had shifted to barely concealed skepticism. Fascinating, she said finally. I'd love to observe one of your procedures sometime. I'd be honored, I replied, knowing I'd have to disappear before that could happen. That night, Delilah was ecstatic. Dr. Voss wants to observe your surgery. Do you know what this means for your career? She's like the queen of cardiac surgery. If she endorses your technique, you could write your own ticket anywhere. I smiled and nodded, internally planning my escape from this nightmare. But before I could figure out how to extricate myself, fate intervened. The next evening, Delilah and I were having dinner at a nice restaurant when a woman at the next table collapsed. She was in her 60s, clutching her chest, gasping for air. Heart attack, someone shouted. Is there a doctor here? Delilah immediately stood up. My boyfriend's a cardiac surgeon. Every eye in the restaurant turned to me. The woman, later I learned her name was Mrs. Walsh, was unconscious now, her lips turning blue. Someone had called 911, but the ambulance would take at least 10 minutes. Dr. Morrison, the restaurant manager said urgently. Can you help? I knelt beside the woman, my hands shaking. This was it, the moment where my elaborate lie would either be exposed or someone would die because of my deception. I checked her pulse, barely detectable. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. From my obsessive research, I recognized the signs of cardiac arrest. I need someone to call out the time, I said, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. I positioned my hands on her chest and started CPR compressions, counting under my breath. Months of watching medical videos had at least taught me basic life support, and I'd actually taken a CPR certification course years earlier for a summer job as a lifeguard. "How long has it been?" I called out. "3 minutes, someone replied. I continued compressions, fighting panic. In the movies, people wake up after CPR. In real life, I knew the statistics were much grimmer. "Is she responding?" Delilah asked, kneeling beside me. "Not yet," I said, continuing compressions. Around us, a crowd had gathered. People were filming with their phones, and I could hear someone calling it in to a local news station. My fake identity was about to become very public. At minute 7, just as I was beginning to think I'd killed someone with my incompetence, the woman gasped and opened her eyes. The restaurant erupted in applause. "You saved her life," the manager said, tears in his eyes. The paramedics arrived and took over, stabilizing the woman before transporting her to the hospital. As they wheeled her out, she grabbed my hand. "Thank you, doctor," she whispered. I wanted to disappear. The local news picked up the story. Local heart surgeon saves life at downtown restaurant. My fake identity was now public record, complete with photos and video footage of me performing CPR. Dr. Rodriguez called me the next day. "Bryce, I saw the news. Amazing work. Listen, I've got a case coming up that I'd really value your input on. Triple bypass, very complex. The patient is a 52-year-old contractor, heavy smoker, 3-vessel disease with poor distal targets. Would you be willing to assist?" I couldn't keep deflecting forever. "I'm actually taking a sabbatical," I said, stepping back from active practice for a while. "What? Why?" I searched for a plausible excuse. "Burnout. The stress has been getting to me." "That's understandable," he said sympathetically. "This job takes everything out of you. The responsibility, the life and death decisions, the hours. When do you think you'll be ready to return?" "I'm not sure," I said honestly. That conversation made me realize I had to end this before someone got hurt. I started planning my exit strategy. I told Delilah I was considering relocating, maybe taking a position at a hospital in another state. She was supportive, as always, even suggesting she could transfer with her company to stay close. "There are some amazing opportunities in Seattle," she said. "Or what about San Francisco? I have contacts at UCSF." The guilt was eating me alive. Every day I woke up knowing I was living a lie, knowing that people were trusting me with information and decisions that could affect their health, their lives. But before I could implement my escape plan, Dr. Voss called. "Dr. Morrison," she said, her voice formal. "I've been doing some research into your background." My heart stopped. "I'm having trouble verifying your credentials. Johns Hopkins has no record of you in their cardiac surgery program. The medical board has no license on file for you, and the hospital address on your business card is just a mail forwarding service." The moment I'd been dreading had finally arrived. "There must be some mistake," I said weakly. "I don't think so," she replied. "I think we need to have a conversation. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 2 p.m.? I hung up and sat in my apartment for 3 hours, staring at the wall. Around me were all the props of my false life, medical textbooks, anatomy charts, stethoscopes I'd never used on a real patient. It looked like a doctor's study, but it was really just an elaborate movie set for a role I'd never been qualified to play. I could run, disappear before anyone else figured it out, change my name, move to another city, start over. But Delilah deserved the truth. That night, I took her to the same coffee shop where we'd met 18 months earlier. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. She smiled. "You look so serious. Are you okay?" "I'm not a doctor," I said quietly. She laughed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not a doctor. I've never been to medical school. I work at a coffee shop." Her smile faded. "That's not funny, Bryce. I'm not joking. I lied to you the day we met, and I've been lying every day since." I told her everything. The fake credentials, the made-up stories, the desperate research sessions, the terror of standing in that operating room while her mother's life hung in the balance. I told her about the business cards, the rented office, the carefully crafted responses to medical questions I didn't understand. She listened in complete silence, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, a cold fury I'd never seen before. "My mother," she said slowly. "When my mother was dying, you stood in that operating room and pretended to be qualified to save her life." "I didn't do anything," I said. "Dr. Rodriguez performed the surgery. You just what? Stood there while I believed my boyfriend was helping save my mother's life? I know how it sounds. Do you?" She cut me off. "Do you know how it sounds? Because it sounds like you're a sociopath who's been manipulating me for over a year." The words hit harder because they might have been true. What kind of person maintains such an elaborate deception for so long? I tried to explain about the small lie that spiraled, about how I'd gotten in too deep to back out, about how I'd never meant for it to go so far. "The woman at the restaurant," she said. "You performed CPR on someone while pretending to be a doctor. What if you'd done it wrong? What if she died because she trusted you?" "I did save her," I said desperately. "By luck." Delilah stood up, her voice rising. "You saved her by pure luck and you don't even see how insane that is." Other customers were staring now. Delilah lowered her voice, but her words cut deeper. "Every memory I have of us is contaminated now. Every conversation, every moment of trust, every time I defended you to people who had doubts, it was all based on a lie." "Not all of it," I said. "My feelings for you were real, are real." She looked at me with disgust. "Your feelings for me? You mean your feelings for the woman who was impressed by your fake career? Because the real you, the barista who lies about being a doctor, never actually got to know me. She was right. I'd been so busy maintaining my fictional identity that I'd never given her the chance to know who I really was. What about the people you gave medical advice to? She continued. Mrs. Patterson, who thinks you saved her life? Mr. Chen, who asked you about his father's heart medication. You gave them medical advice without any training or qualifications. I'd forgotten about some of the consultations, the casual medical opinions I'd offered based on half-understood research. And Dr. Rodriguez, she said, he looks up to you. He thinks he learned surgical techniques from you. What happens when he finds out his mentor was a fraud? The full scope of my deception was becoming clear. It wasn't just about us. I'd affected dozens of people, maybe more. Delilah, please, don't, she said, gathering her purse. Don't say my name. Don't contact me. Don't ever come near me or my family again. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me sitting alone at the table where our relationship had begun with a lie. The next day, I met with Dr. Voss. Her office was intimidating. Walls covered with medical degrees, awards, and photos of her with other renowned surgeons. I sat across from her massive desk, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. So, she said, leaning back in her chair, Bryce Morrison, cardiac surgeon. Except there's no record of you anywhere in the medical community. I didn't try to maintain the lie. No, I said quietly, there isn't. What you've done is illegal, she said. Practicing medicine without a license, fraudulent representation, potentially endangering lives. I could have you arrested right now. I nodded. I know. The question is what to do about it. She studied me for a long moment. Dr. Rodriguez speaks very highly of you. Says your presence during surgery gave him confidence to perform at his best. The woman at the restaurant is alive because of your CPR, so while what you did was criminal, the outcomes were fortunate. I never intended for anyone to get hurt, I said. Intent doesn't matter when you're dealing with people's lives, she replied sharply. But here's what puzzles me. In my conversations with various doctors who've interacted with you, they all mention how well-informed you seemed. How did someone with no medical training acquire such detailed knowledge? I explained my desperate study sessions, the hours spent watching surgical videos, memorizing medical journals, researching every condition and procedure I might be asked about. I probably spent 60 hours a week studying, I said. Medical terminology, surgical procedures, cardiac anatomy, pharmacology. I bought medical textbooks, subscribed to journals, joined online medical education platforms. Fascinating, she said. You essentially taught yourself enough medical knowledge to fool trained professionals, at least in conversation. Basic knowledge, I corrected. Enough to sound convincing, not enough to actually practice medicine. Still, she mused, it shows remarkable dedication and aptitude for learning. She was quiet for several minutes, making notes on a legal pad. Here's what's going to happen, she said finally. You're going to disappear from Portland's medical community. Dr. Morrison, the cardiac surgeon, ceases to exist as of today. You'll have no further contact with any medical professionals you've deceived. I nodded. However, she continued, I'm not going to report this to the authorities. I looked up, surprised. Instead, I'm going to make you an offer. Our hospital has a patient advocacy program. We need someone to help patients and families navigate the medical system, understand procedures, and communicate with doctors. It requires extensive medical knowledge but no license to practice. Why would you offer me a job? I asked. Because despite your fraudulent methods, you've demonstrated 3 things: the ability to acquire complex medical knowledge quickly, genuine care for patients, and the capacity to communicate effectively with both medical professionals and civilians. She slid a packet across the desk. The position requires completing a certification program, legitimate this time. 6 months of intensive study, followed by supervised practical experience. If you're serious about being involved in medicine, this is a legal way to do it. I stared at the documents. Why are you helping me? Because I've seen what you're capable of when you apply yourself. You managed to fool trained doctors for over a year. Imagine what you could accomplish if you channeled that energy into legitimate medical education. What about Dr. Rodriguez? The other doctors I deceived? I'll handle that, she said. I'll explain that Dr. Morrison had to relocate unexpectedly for personal reasons. They'll be disappointed to lose a colleague, but they'll move on. And the people I gave medical advice to? Most of your advice was sound, she said. You consistently recommended they see qualified physicians for serious concerns. In several cases, your recommendations likely saved lives. That afternoon, I went to the coffee shop where I'd worked before my life became a lie. Bryce, my former manager called out. Haven't seen you in forever. How's the doctor thing going? Even here, my fictional identity had followed me. Actually, I said, I'm looking for my old job back. Really? But you're a surgeon now. It's complicated, I said. The next few weeks were brutal. I had to face the consequences of my deception while starting over completely. The news story about the restaurant incident had made me locally famous as a hero doctor, so I couldn't go anywhere without people recognizing me and wanting to talk about medical issues. I'd politely redirect them to see their real doctors, but the irony was suffocating. I was more qualified to give medical advice now than when I'd been pretending to be a surgeon. Doctor Rodriguez called several times, confused about my sudden disappearance. I let the calls go to voicemail, listening to his increasingly concerned messages. Bryce, I hope everything's okay. I really valued our conversations. If you ever want to talk shop, you know where to find me. The guilt was overwhelming. He genuinely benefited from our interactions, even though they were based on lies. His confidence had improved, his surgical outcomes had been excellent, and he credited me with helping him become a better doctor. But it was all built on deception. 6 months later, I completed the patient advocacy certification program. Dr. Voss had been right. My obsessive study habits translated well to legitimate medical education. This time, instead of memorizing information to maintain a lie, I was learning to help people navigate real medical crises. The program was intense. We studied medical terminology, hospital procedures, insurance systems, and patient rights. We learned how to translate complex medical information into language that families could understand, how to advocate for patients who felt overwhelmed by the healthcare system, and how to identify when medical care was inadequate. My first case was a family whose teenage daughter needed heart surgery. As I sat with them in the waiting room, explaining the procedure and what to expect, I thought about Delilah and her mother. The surgeon is Dr. Martinez, I told them. She's one of the best pediatric cardiac surgeons in the region. Your daughter will be in excellent hands. How do you know? The father asked. How do we know we can trust her? I pulled out Dr. Martinez's credentials, her success rates, the outcomes data for her procedures, real information, verified facts, transparent data. Because this is her record, I said, and because I'm here to help you understand every step of the process. I'd learned that being part of the medical world didn't require pretending to be something I wasn't. There was honor in helping people understand their treatment, in being an advocate for patients who felt overwhelmed by the complexity of modern medicine. The work was deeply satisfying in a way my fake surgeon career had never been. When I helped a family understand a diagnosis, when I advocated for better pain management for a patient, when I helped someone navigate insurance approval for a necessary procedure, those victories were real. A year later, I was walking through downtown Portland when I saw her. Delilah was at an outdoor cafe, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. She looked happy, genuinely happy in a way I wasn't sure she'd ever been with me. Our eyes met for just a moment. She didn't wave or smile, just a brief acknowledgement that we'd seen each other. Then she turned back to her companion. I kept walking. I never tried to contact her, never sent an explanation or apology. She'd been clear about wanting me out of her life, and respecting that boundary was the least I could do after everything I'd put her through. But sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I told the truth that first day in the coffee shop. Are you in medicine? No, but I wish I was. Maybe she would have been impressed by my honesty instead of my fictional credentials. Maybe we could have built something real instead of a relationship founded on elaborate deception. Or maybe she would have politely finished her drink and never given me another thought. I'll never know. What I do know is that the biggest lie I ever told taught me the most important truth. You can't build a real life on a false foundation. Every relationship, every achievement, every moment of happiness that comes from deception is ultimately hollow. 3 years later, I'm still working as a patient advocate. I've helped hundreds of families navigate medical crises, and every day, I use the knowledge I gained during my months of frantic study to make a real difference in people's lives. I never became a doctor, but I did become someone who belongs in the medical world, legitimately this time. One of my cases involved helping a young couple whose newborn needed emergency heart surgery. The father was a philosophy graduate student, working part-time jobs to pay for school while his wife recovered from a difficult pregnancy. I feel so helpless, he told me. Everyone here knows more than I do. The doctors use terms I don't understand, and I'm afraid to ask questions because I don't want to seem stupid. I looked at him and saw myself at 23, educated but directionless, smart but insecure, desperate to appear more qualified than he actually was. The doctors don't expect you to understand everything, I told him. Your job isn't to be a medical expert. Your job is to be your son's advocate and to ask questions when you don't understand something. I spent the next hour teaching him medical terminology, explaining the surgical procedure, and helping him prepare questions for the surgical team. When his son came through the surgery successfully, the father hugged me with tears in his eyes. Thank you for helping me feel like I could actually help my son. That's when I realized the scar from my lie wasn't just about punishment. It was about perspective. I understood the desperation to appear qualified, the fear of not being enough, the temptation to fake expertise rather than admit ignorance. But I also understood the peace that comes from being genuinely helpful instead of just appearing impressive. Sometimes I wonder if Dr. Voss suspected all along that offering me a legitimate path into medicine was more transformative than any punishment could have been. Instead of destroying me for my deception, she gave me the chance to earn my place in the world I'd tried to fake my way into. The lie spiraled out of control because I let it. But the truth, the real truth about who I could become if I stopped pretending and started working, that spiraled into something better than I'd ever imagined. Last month, I received an unexpected phone call. "Is this Bryce Morrison?" the voice asked. "Yes, this is Dr. Rodriguez. I know it's been a few years, but I wanted to reach out." My stomach dropped. Had he discovered the truth? "I've been thinking about our time working together," he continued. "Your mentorship really shaped how I approach surgery. I wanted you to know that I was just promoted to chief of cardiac surgery at Portland General. Congratulations," I managed. "I couldn't have done it without the confidence you helped me build. I know you disappeared suddenly, and I never got to properly thank you." After we hung up, I sat in my office, surrounded by legitimate certifications and real patient cases, thinking about the complexity of truth and lies. Dr. Rodriguez had become an excellent surgeon, in part because he believed he'd learned from an expert. The confidence I'd helped him build was real, even though my credentials weren't. Mrs. Patterson had caught her heart disease early, because I'd insisted she see a cardiologist. Her life was saved by advice from someone with no medical training who happened to recognize warning signs from obsessive research. The woman at the restaurant survived because I knew CPR, not because I was a cardiac surgeon. Sometimes the outcome can be right even when the method is wrong. But that doesn't justify the deception. I just wish it hadn't taken breaking someone else's heart to learn it. 5 years after the lie began, I'm finally living an honest life. I wake up every morning knowing that my work is legitimate, my knowledge is real, and my relationships are built on truth. It's a quieter life than the one I'd imagined as a fake surgeon. No one calls me doctor, no one asks for my autograph, and no one considers me a hero, but it's mine. And for the first time since that day in the coffee shop when I told Delilah I was a surgeon, I can look at myself in the mirror without shame. The biggest lie I ever told spiraled completely out of control, but maybe that was the only way I could find my way back to the truth.